While I was volunteering abroad, my stepfather called saying, "I've sold your mountain cabin to cover my financial mistakes. It's for the greater good, mine." He smirked. I calmly replied, "Hope it works out." He didn't understand my behavior at the moment of the call. When I returned, I revealed the cabin wasn't just property, it was my mother's dream, the one thing she built with her own hands away from the chaos, away from him. And now he had the audacity to sell it to strip away the last piece of her legacy. For his selfish greed, hope it works out. I said, my voice steady. He thought I was powerless. He thought I would break. But what he didn't know was that the cabin was never his to sell. I kept the phone pressed against my ear for a few seconds after he hung up, listening to the dead silence on the other end. Not because I was in shock. I had prepared for this moment long ago. I let the stillness settle in, absorbing the weight of what had just happened. He thought he had taken something. From me, he thought he had one. I slid the phone onto the wooden counter and turned back to the dimly lit room. The volunteer center was quiet now, the last of the team having gone to rest. The scent of rain clung to the air, a reminder of the storm that had passed through earlier. I walked over to the window, staring at my reflection in the glass. My face was unreadable, my expression calm. But beneath the surface, something sharper burned, a quiet, simmering certainty. I had always known this day would come. My stepfather had a pattern, an ability to convince himself that everything good in life was meant to be his, regardless of who actually built it. He had done it with my mother, leeching off her success, pretending to be the man of the house while she worked tirelessly to build a future for us when she passed. He saw it as a chance to finally claim everything as his own, but the cabin had remained out of his reach. He'll know he thought I would rage, scream, demand answers. That's how he operated. Through chaos, through emotional manipulation, but I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Instead, I exhaled slowly. Reaching for my suitcase, it's time to go home. The airport was crowded. The usual chaos of hurried travelers and overhead announcements blending into a dull hum. I kept my movements efficient, boarding past security gate, everything in order. Everything moving forward. As the plane lifted off the ground, I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes. My mind drifted to the last time I had seen the cabin, the crisp mountain air, the scent of pine, the way the wooden floors creaked beneath my feet, like they were alive with memory. My mother had spent years shaping that place, every inch of it a testament to her resilience, and now he thought it was gone. I opened my eyes, staring out at the dark clouds stretching across the horizon. By the time I landed, he would know just how wrong he was. The drive up the mountain was longer than I remembered the road, twisted through dense forests, the mist rolling. In like an old friend, I kept the windows down, letting the cold air bite at my skin. Keeping me focused, I had called ahead, confirming the details with the town's records office. The name on the deed hadn't changed. The sale had gone through, yes, but not in the way my stepfather believed. I reached the final turn. And there it was, the cabin stood at the top of the ridge, untouched by time. A fresh coat of paint on the shutters. New fencing around the perimeter, whoever had bought it was trying to make it their own. A truck was parked nearby, workers moving in and out with materials. I pulled in slowly, stepping out and taking it all in. Everything about this place felt the same, but I wasn't the same person who had left. I started toward the house, my boots crunching against the gravel. The front door was open, and as I stepped inside, I was hit with the familiar scent of wood and earth. I could hear voices from the back of the house, the sound of tools at work. A man in his 40s wearing a tool belt emerged from the hallway, wiping his hands on a rag. He barely glanced up as he spoke. "Hey, can I help?" Then he saw me. I smiled, slow and deliberate. "No, I think I'm exactly where I need to be." His brow furrowed. "This is private property, is it?" I tilted my head, stepping past him and into what used to be the main sitting room. My mother's favorite chair had been removed, but the fireplace was still the same. The floors, the walls, they all remembered. I turned back to him. "Who owns this place?" The man straightened. "Not sure what you're getting at, but the new owner just bought it. I work for him." I let the words hang in the air before I said, "That's interesting." His confusion deepened. "And why is that?" "Because according to the county records, I said, pulling a folded document from my pocket. The deed to this property still belongs to someone else, and that someone isn't your boss. He frowned, taking a step forward. That's not possible. The sale went through. I held up a hand. Oh, a sale happened all right, but my stepfather never had the right to sell it. I let the words sink in. He just didn't know that the weight of my statement settled in the room. I glanced around one last time, then stepped back toward the door. You might want to call your boss, I said over my shoulder. Tell him he's got a problem, and with that I walked out, leaving only the sound of my footsteps against the wooden floors, the same ones my mother once walked. The ones that still belonged to me. I stepped onto the porch, breathing in the cold mountain air. This wasn't over, not yet. I stepped onto the porch, breathing in the crisp mountain air, feeling the weight of the past pressing against my chest. The wood beneath my feet creaked slightly, just as it always had. A familiar whisper of home, but this wasn't home anymore, not yet. The man inside the cabin was still standing there, gripping his tool belt, like it held all the answers he needed. His confusion was understandable after all. He had no idea. He was working on a project that legally wasn't supposed to exist. I descended the porch steps, walking toward my car with measured steps. The key was already in my hand, but I didn't open the door just yet. Instead, I turned back, letting my gaze sweep over the property one more time. Every detail was etched into my memory. The way the roof sloped slightly to the left, the way the front windows framed the sunset perfectly in the evening my mother had spent years perfecting every detail of this place, making it a sanctuary, a place untouched by the chaos of the outside world. And now someone had painted over her dreams, like they were nothing. I could feel the man's eyes still on me from the doorway. And unsure whether he should call someone, I gave him a small, unreadable smile before finally getting into my car. I wasn't here to start a fight, not yet. The town looked the same, but I had changed as I drove through the winding streets. I took note of what remained and what had shifted in my absence. The old diner was still standing, its neon sign flickering in protest against the years. A few of the small shops had changed owners, but the bones of the place remained the same, familiar, yet slightly altered, like a dream, remembered differently upon waking. I parked in front of the records office, cutting the engine and stepping out into the cool afternoon. The bell above the door jingled as I pushed it open, and the scent of old paper and ink greeted me instantly. A woman behind the counter glanced up, recognition flickering across her features before she smiled. Well, Albie, she said, sitting down her pen. Didn't think I'd see you back around here. Didn't think I'd have a reason to come back at 8 a.m., aided, walking toward the counter. But here we are. She eyed me carefully, her smile fading slightly. This about the cabin, I nodded. She exhaled, shaking her head. Knew something was off about that sale. When I saw the paperwork come through, I thought you'd be the one signing it. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder I had brought with me. I need the most recent copy of the deed on file. She hesitated only a moment before nodding. Give me a minute, I watched as she disappeared into the back room, leaving me alone with the quiet hum of the office. The walls were lined with shelves of documents, each one a small piece of someone's history, someone's fight. This was my fight now. When she returned, she slid a file across the counter. I flipped it open, scanning. The familiar signatures, my mother's, and then further down my friend's. The one I had entrusted with the transfer before I left. Everything was exactly as it should be, but the stepfather's name was nowhere on it. I knew he couldn't sell it. I murmured more to myself than to her. She nodded legally, but that didn't stop the sale from going through. Seems the buyer didn't do their due diligence. Guess they figured no one would challenge it. My jaw tightened. They figured wrong. I drove past my stepfather's house next, not because I planned to confront him, not yet, but because I wanted to see how he was living, how comfortable he had made himself. After what he had done, his car was in the driveway, a newer model than the last time I had seen him. He had wasted no time in spending the money in pretending like his victory was set in stone. I slowed as I passed, watching the house for any sign of movement, and then through the front window I saw him. He was leaning back in an armchair, a drink in one hand, looking as relaxed as I had ever seen him. For a moment, a flicker of something sharp. Twisted inside me, not anger. Not yet, just the certainty that he had no idea what was coming. I didn't stop. I kept driving by the time I reached the outskirts of town. The sun was dipping low behind the trees, casting long shadows across the road. I pulled over at the lookout point just before the mountain road curved toward the cabin. The view was the same as I remembered. Rolling hills stretching into the horizon. The town nestled below like a forgotten secret. I stepped out of the car, breathing in deeply. The air here was different, cleaner, untouched. The town could change, my stepfather could scheme, but this place would always be the same, and now it was time to take back what was mine. I pulled out my phone, dialing a number I had been holding onto for months when my friend picked up. Their voice was steady. "You're back, I'm back," I confirmed, "and it's time." "Oh, then you sure?" I looked out over the horizon, the wind tugging at my jacket. "He sold something that was never his," I said, "and going to make sure he pays for it." My grip tightened on the phone. "We start tomorrow." I hung up the call. The plan now set in motion. The cool wind swept through the overlook, rustling the dry leaves scattered across the pavement. My fingers tightened around the phone before I slid it back into my pocket. This wasn't just about reclaiming a piece of property, it was about justice, about ensuring my stepfather understood, truly, understood that he had never been in control. The morning came swiftly, bringing with it a crisp mountain breeze and the weight of inevitable consequences. I arrived at the town's legal office. Just as they were opening, my friend was already inside, waiting, the thick folder resting on the desk between us. "Everything is in order," they said, tapping the paperwork. "The sale was fraudulent. You hold the legal deed. They'll have no choice but to acknowledge it." I nodded, scanning the neatly typed documents. It was all there, irrefutable, binding. My stepfather had just made a mistake. He had built his castle on air, and today the walls would collapse. "Let's make this official," I said, my voice steady. The town hall was busier than usual. The locals had a way of sensing when something was about to unfold, and word had already spread that something about the cabin sale was amiss. A few curious eyes trailed me as I stepped inside. But I ignored them. This wasn't for spectacle. This was for closure at the front of the room. The county record office held its weekly public meeting, mostly routine approval, zoning requests, and the occasional property dispute. I took my seat near the front, placing my folder on the table before me. Then right on, my stepfather entered. He strolled in like he belonged, shoulders squared, exuding false confidence. He hadn't noticed me yet, caught up in shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries with familiar faces to them. He was just another man who had made a good deal, securing his financial future. But today that illusion would shatter. The buyer arrived next. A man in his late 50s, dressed in a crisp blazer, with the air of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. His expression was one of impatience, as though today's proceedings were merely a formality. Before he could move forward with his renovations, he was about to realize. Otherwise, the meeting proceeded with its usual mundane formalities. I waited, letting the anticipation build. Then when the moderator called for new business, I rose to my feet. "I have a matter regarding a fraudulent property sale," I announced, my voice carrying through the hall. Heads turned. My stepfather's smirk faltered as his gaze finally locked onto mine. For the first time, I saw something flicker across his face. "Uncertainty, please." "State your claim," the moderator said, adjusting his glasses. I wanted every word to land with precision. "The property in question is a cabin located at the edge of town, recently sold by a man who never had the legal right to do so." I turned slightly, letting my gaze settle on my stepfather. "This sale was conducted without proper authorization, and the deed remains legally in my name." A murmur spread through the room. The buyer's face darkened as he shifted in his seat. My stepfather let out a forked chuckle, leaning back now. "Hold on a second." I lifted the folder and placed it on the table with a decisive thud. "Here is the original deed, recorded and signed before I left town. My stepfather was never the legal owner. The sale he conducted was fraudulent, and therefore the transaction is invalid." The moderator took the folder, flipping through the documents. A few tense moments passed as he read, his expression growing increasingly serious. Then finally he closed the folder. This paperwork is legitimate. He turned to the buyer. I'm afraid you've been misled. The buyer's chair scraped against the floor as he pushed back abruptly. You mean to tell me I purchased a property that was never his to sell? His voice was dangerously low, his temper barely contained. My stepfather shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat. Now look, this is just a misunderstanding. I was under the impression that I cut him off my voice. Sharp, you knew exactly what you were doing. You counted on me being too far away to stop you. His face rained. You were trying to take something that was never yours, I said evenly. But the law doesn't work that way, not anymore. The buyer turned to the moderator. I want my money back. Every cent. The moderator nodded. This matter will need to be handled legally, but given the evidence presented, the responsibility to return the funds will likely fall on the seller. All eyes landed on my stepfather. The weight of reality finally sank in. His bravado cracked, replaced by something rear panic. I don't have that kind of money, he muttered. The buyer's expression darkened. Then I suggest you find a way. Silence stretched through the room. My stepfather swallowed hard, his gaze darting to me, searching for some kind of escape. There wasn't one. I leaned forward slightly. Hope it works out, the exact words he had thrown at me over the phone the moment I said them. His face, twisted realization hitting him like a blow. He had walked straight into this, thinking he was untouchable, thinking I wouldn't fight back. But now he had nowhere to run. I walked out of the town hall feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. The crisp mountain air filled my lungs clearer than it had been in years. My stepfather's fate was sealed. Whether through legal action or financial ruin, he would feel the consequences of his own greed. The buyer stormed past me, already on his phone, no doubt making calls to his legal team. I didn't pity him. He had been careless, failing to verify what he was purchasing. But my real focus had never been him. It had been the man who thought he could rewrite history. And now history was correcting itself. I made my way back toward my car, taking in the familiar sights, the roads I had once driven as a child. The mountains standing tall as silent witnesses to everything. The fight wasn't over just yet. Loose ends needed tying, but this was the first checkmate, and I had no intention of stopping now. I stepped out of the town hall, the air crisp with the scent of pine, and the remnants of my stepfather was still inside, no doubt scrambling for some excuse, some desperate attempt to talk his way out of the mess he had created. But there was no way out. The walls he had built around his deception had crumbled, and now the weight of reality would bury him. I walked to my car, but before I could reach the door, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. Wait! I turned to see the buyer approaching, his face a mixture of frustration and controlled fury. He had a phone clutched tightly in his hand, his fingers white from the pressure. You knew, didn't you? He accused, his voice low but sharp. I met his gaze evenly. I knew he'd try something eventually, but I didn't know he'd be reckless enough to attempt this. The man exhaled sharply, dragging a hand down his face. I don't take losses lightly. I'm sure you don't, I said cool. His eyes flickered with something unreadable before he nodded. Then I hope you understand that I'll make sure he pays for every cent that makes two of us. Without another word, he turned and walked toward his car, already dialing another number. I watched him leave, knowing my stepfather's problems were only beginning back inside the town hall. My stepfather sat hunched in one of the wooden chairs, his face pale, his hands gripping the arms of the seat like they were the only things keeping him upright. His usual bravado was gone, replaced by something raw and unfamiliar. Fear. The moderator had left, and the clerk behind the counter was finishing up paperwork work. He barely looked up as my stepfather leaned forward, trying to steady his voice. This can't be real, he muttered. There has to be a way to fix this. The clerk sighed clearly, unimpressed with his sudden change in demeanor. The only way to fix it is to return the money which you no longer have. The words hit him like a blow. He slumped back, fingers raking through his graying hair. The buyer had been generous to give him time, perhaps too generous, but the legal process was clear. A fraudulent sale meant legal repercussions, and financial restitution would be the first demand. The second would be far worse. My stepfather pushed himself up from the chair, his movements sluggish like the weight of his mistakes had finally settled into his bones. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and I knew without seeing the screen who it was, his creditors, his mistakes, his past, and now they were all catching up to him. The next few weeks unraveled him. The first blow came from the ley legal claim filed by the buyer, an immediate demand for repayment of the funds used in the fraudulent purchase. The buyer wasn't the kind of man to accept failure. He was ruthless, moving quickly through legal channels, ensuring that my stepfather had no escape. The second blow came when the town caught wind of the scandal. The locals had never fully trusted my stepfather. He had always been an outsider in their eyes, the man who had attached himself to my mother and her success. Now, with his deception fully exposed us, the quiet judgment turned into open avoidance, doors that once welcomed him, now closed. Favors that had once been extended were revoked. His social currency depleted faster than his actual finances. And then the final blow landed the banks. The money he had recklessly spent after the sale, the car, the debts he thought he had covered, none of it mattered now. With the fraudulent transaction nullified, his accounts were frozen. He had borrowed against money that no longer legally existed, and the bank wanted their share. The calls became relentless notices. Buses arrived in stacks, each one a reminder of how little control he had left. And then finally his house. The last thing he had was put on notice for repossession. I knew it before he did. I had seen the foreclosure notice at the county office when I had gone to confirm the final legal steps regarding the cabin. I had held the paper in my hands, reading the words slowly, deliberately. It was done. He had nothing left. The day he realized it, he came to me. I was at the cabin, standing on the porch, watching the sun set over the ridge. The light cast long shadows over the trees, the kind that stretched toward the horizon but never quite reached it. I heard the sound of a car struggling up the gravel path. I didn't turn. Footsteps slow, uncertain, then silence. And then his voice hoarse, strained, "I need help." I finally turned to face him. He looked smaller. The weight of his choices had hollowed him out, leaving only the remnants of the man who had once strutted through life as if the world owed him something. He swallowed hard. "I don't have anywhere else to go." I leaned against the railing, arms crossed. "You made your choices." His face tightened. "I made mistakes. I didn't speak." His gaze flickered to the cabin, the one thing he had tried to take from me. His voice cracked. "I just need time to fix things." A humorless smile too huge at the corner of my lips. "Time won't fix this." His jaw clenched, desperation flashing across his face. "I'm still your family." I pushed off the railing, stepping closer, meeting his eyes with unshaken resolve. "You stopped being my family the moment you tried to steal what wasn't yours." His breath hitched. I didn't know what else to do. "You could have chosen honesty, integrity. You could have chosen to be better." Silence stretched between us. The wind rustled. The wind, through the trees, carrying away whatever was left of his dignity. His shoulders slumped. For the first time, he truly looked like a man who had lost everything. And then the final nail. I tilted my head slightly, my voice calm. "Hope." It works out, the same words he had said to me when he thought he had won. He flinched as if struck. He knew. This was the end without another word. I turned and walked back into the cabin, shutting the door behind me. I didn't look back. He had built his downfall with his own hands, and now he had to live in it. I stood inside the cabin, my back against the door, listening outside. The wind carried the sound of gravel shifting beneath hesitant steps. He was still there, waiting. A minute passed, then another. A breath said. The sound of someone realizing they had nowhere left to go. I turned, peering through the curtain. He hadn't moved. His shoulders were hunched, hands buried deep in his pockets. His once proud frame now sagging under the weight of his own downfall. I should have felt something, pity, maybe some lingering trace of warmth for the man who had at one point been tied to my life. But there was nothing, just a hollow sense of inevitability. This was the moment he had set in motion. The day he picked up the phone and smugly declared that my mother's cabin was his. To sell, I had let him believe it. then let him think he had W. And now standing before the door, he no longer had the right to enter. He knew better still, he didn't leave. I sighed, pressing my palms against the smooth wood of the kitchen counter. He wasn't going to go quietly. That wasn't in his nature. And so with the same measured calm I had held through every step of this, I walked to the door and pulled it open. The cold mountain air rushed in, biting at my skin. He flinched slightly but lifted his gaze to meet mine. His eyes, once full of arrogance, now brimmed with something else entirely. Desperation, his voice cracked hoarse from a lifetime of never having to beg. He tried again. I just need a little time, I said, nothing, waiting. He took it as permission to continue stepping closer. His shoes crunching against the gravel, I lost everything. He gestured vaguely toward the town below, as if expecting me to acknowledge the obvious. The house, the accounts, everything's frozen. They're taking the car next. His breath hitched, but he forced a weak chuckle as if trying to downplay the collapse of his carefully constructed illusion ions. Funny how fast things change, huh? I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. He swallowed hard. Look, I know I messed up, but you... He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. You have the cabin, you have everything you wanted. That was the angle he was playing, the appeal to fairness. As if this was some even trade, as if I had taken something from him in return. I tilted my head slightly. Everything I wanted, his jaw tightened. You know what I mean? I did. I just wanted to hear him say it. I just need a place to figure things out. He continued shifting on his feet, just until I can get back on my feet. There was the final plea, the moment where he tried to make me the villain if I refused. I let the silence stretch between us, the wind filling the gaps where words should have been. His shoulders tensed, waiting, hoping. Then finally I spoke. You stood in this exact spot, I said quietly, believing you had one. He opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a hand. You called me from the comfort of a house you can't afford anymore, bragging about how you'd sold this cabin to fix your financial mistakes. I leaned forward slightly, my voice razor sharp. You didn't care what it meant to me, you never have. He blinked rapidly, the weight of my words settling in his chest. You wanted me powerless. My voice didn't waver. You wanted me to beg, to fight, to lose control. I exhaled, shaking my head. But I didn't, and now you're the one standing here with nothing. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. I straightened my eyes, locking onto his. Hope it works out. His entire body went rigid. The words landed like a slap, their familiarity twisting something deep inside him. His lips parted slightly, but no words came out. He knew that was the end. I held his gaze for a moment longer, then stepped back into the cabin and shut the door. This time, I didn't listen for his footsteps. I didn't need to. I already knew I had one. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing the past outside. I exhaled slowly, pressing my back against the wood. My palms resting flat. Against the grain, the silence inside the cabin wasn't empty. It was full of history, of memory, of the weight my mother had carried for years. Before she passed, and now, for the first time in a long time, it was mine again, truly mine. I walked forward, my fingers trailing over the rough-hewn walls, feeling the grooves in the wood, the knots where my mother's hands had once worked. She had built this place for herself, for us, not for him, never for him. The fireplace still smelled of old embers, though no fire had been lit in months. The chairs had been rearranged, a few new additions left behind by the would-be buyer, but the bones of the place remained the same. This cabin had endured waiting for me to come home. I moved through the space with quiet reverence, touching everything, reconnecting the wooden table where we had shared meals, the window ledge where she used to rest her coffee cup as she watched the sunrise, the old bookshelf, its corners worn from years of use. It was all still here, still standing. I walked to the back door, pushing it open. The wind rushed in, crisp and biting, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Stepping onto the porch, I let my gaze sweep over the L-land, the view stretching endlessly beyond the treetops. The mountain stood as it always had, unchanged by time or greed. It didn't care about the battles waged over this cabin. It had been here long before us, and it would remain long after I breathed in deeply, letting the cold fill my lungs. It was over the days that followed felt lighter, as if a weight I had carried for years had finally been lifted. I spent the first morning clearing out what didn't belong, removing the traces of someone else's attempt to claim this place. The furniture the buyer had brought in was the first to go. I didn't need reminders of what could have been. By the afternoon, the cabin looked as it should. Simple, sturdy, a reflection of my mother's quiet strength. I sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, watching the sky bleed into hues of orange and violet. The air had turned colder, the promise of winter settling in. But for the first time in a long time, I felt warm. A knock on the porch railing made me glance up. My friends stood there, hands in their jacket pockets, a knowing look in their eyes. "Looks different already," they said. I smiled. "Feels different, too." They stepped forward, leaning against the post beside me. "It's yours again," I nodded. The truth of that statement settling deep in my chest. It always was, PA. Then what happens now? Considered that for a moment the fight was over, the damage was done. My stepfather had lost everything, and there was no coming back from it. The town had turned its back on him, and the last I had heard he was leaving, disappearing into whatever shadows remained. But that wasn't my concern anymore. Now it was about moving forward. I think I said finally, "I stay." The words tasted right. My friend nodded, as if they had expected that answer all along. "Good. This place needs you," I smiled. Looking back out at the trees, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. The seasons passed and the cabin remained. When came wrapping the mountain in thick layers of snow. I spent those months tending to the fire, repairing what time had worn down. Making the space truly mine. The solitude was a welcome change. The mountain didn't demand anything from me, it just existed steady and unwavering, just as it always had. Spring followed, melting away the cold, bringing new life to the land. I walked the familiar trails, breathed in the fresh air, and let the past fade into the background. By summer, the cabin felt fully alive again. Friends visited, laughter echoing through the rooms where silence had once settled too deeply. The land thrived, untouched by greed, unspoiled by the hands that had once tried to claim it, and through it all the mountain watched, standing tall, taken. Just like me one evening as the sun dipped behind the ridge, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee in hand, the warmth seeping into my fingers. I thought about everything that had led me here. The betrayal, the fight, the long journey back, it had been worth it. Because now, as the wind rustled through the trees and the last light of day faded into the horizon, I knew one thing with certainty. This was home, and it always would be.